still haven't got the money to pay it, it's a little difficult to award a project to somebody when you don't have the money.
Mayor, Bill Kiley, 105 Edgewood Court. You've done a wonderful job, but what you're saying is exactly what's wrong. And Mayor, we've talked about this at Ashbrook meetings. If we pass the referendum for more taxes, we can go out for bid. That's ridiculous. We should go out for bid and then say, here's what we need in a tax referendum. And what we need is $1.5 million, $2.5 million, 2.8, whatever it is. This is what we need, and it's come from 3 bids. And folks, you want to pay taxes for this or not? We're saying if we have the bond issue passed, then we can go out for bids. That's ridiculous. If I get a raise in my salary, I can go buy a suit. Come on, let's start where, let's start what we need, not what you want. I'm thinking of Todd Stroger here. I need money, but I can't tell you why. Let's find out what it is that we need, and then go to the people and say, the bids are in the $5 million range. This is what we need in a assessment or a tax raise or whatever we need. Let's start with something that's real.
Well, I don't know if I'm wrong, but to do that, we'd have to start the engineering, which could be, I think, $25,000 to $30,000.
Well, it depends on what package we put together.
And you'd have to go out and spend some good money,
Yeah.
and then if the referendum fails,
We don't have
spend
$20,000.
$30,000.
If you didn't spend the good money, and you're asking for a referendum, what are my taxes for? That's what we have you folks for.
But you would still have to go out and
For sure. But that's what we
engineer
do
would
for a
have to do
living.
study and score, you still have to spend the money. I don't know.
That's what we do for a living.
So I think there's a couple options that we've discussed tonight, okay? We put everything down on paper, the subject matter experts in the village put everything down on paper as we've asked over the last 2 meetings. There's 2 ways or 3 ways that we can do this. You're suggesting that we do the engineering studies right now, we spend money up front to do the engineering studies. That's probably a great idea. The con of that, if we're talking about pros and cons, right, for each option, because there's an opportunity cost, and there's a pro and con to every alternative we talked about tonight. So we are here to take your idea and understand, is it more advantageous for us to do the engineering studies up front, knowing that if the referendum doesn't pass, because we can't predict that necessarily. We can try to do PR. People here have mentioned today that we have to be very vigilant about getting the word out, to talk about if we do a street bond, what it is, what it means, how it translates to people's property tax bills, to try to get this passed, because unfortunately, the way that money was going to be raised in the past was not a targeted street referendum, it was more of a general referendum. So I think that if we all think that a street referendum, and there's a lot of people here tonight, that's the way to go, and I'm getting that feeling, right, that we all think a street referendum, we're getting a feeling about that. If you guys are a good microcosm of the village, then we can take the risk potentially to say we'll do the engineering up front. But there is a con to that, and then one thing that we'll have to plan for is if it does not pass, then we'll have to try again or do some alternate funding mechanism that we may have, such as vehicle stickers or other ways to try to raise the money, right? So if we run out of that option for money in March, then we're gonna have to regroup and try to figure out how we're gonna raise money at that point. Or we could do a dual funding plan. We could raise the vehicle sticker, and we could go to the taxpayers and see if the referendum passes. Now, there's people that have been against that, doing anything with the vehicle stickers. So we're just talking about streets now, because the water department is different, as we know. That, because we have 2 sanitary districts in the village, we cannot use the water money, cannot be commingled with the street money. So that $300,000 in that particular account that we can use for water has to be used for water. So I hear a couple different ideas, I think it's good, if people think here tonight that that's an idea to do it up front, I look to the engineer and the subject matter expert to see if there are other pros and cons to doing it that way. What would be the reason you should or shouldn't do that?
Or is there time?
Mayor,
village
I
put in-
we came up with a pretty good number, I think.
Yeah,
$1.8 million, $2.5 million, whatever. Where did that number come from? And if we do a great study here, will it be a lot of difference in that number? I mean, are you pretty certain that $1.5 million or $1.8 million is kind of a good number? And that's all I'm looking for, kind of a good number. If we go out to the engineering study, does that $1.8 million become $4 million? You know, I mean, you know what you're doing for a living, you know, did you come up with a good number for that?
Yes. it
And then
is a
what
good-
is the big problem then that we have to do before we go out for a referendum? You're telling the people, hey, we're pretty sure it's $2.5 million. And it might be 2.8, it might be 2.3, it might be 3. But we think 2.5 is a good starting number. That's what you need to sell to the people. I wanna know, what are you asking me for my taxes? If you tell me what we need to do is raise $2.5 million, and then we split the number with the taxes, I know what we're talking about, and I know where the money's going, and we need the roads fixed.
I have a question for you. Did I understand you to say that we should get the final engineering such that it can be translated into the specs?
No, I don't
Go
think
out for
final-
bid and then get the bid price?
I don't think final engineering is the issue. I think you come to the people and say, whether it's vehicle stickers or property tax or whatever, would you vote for an increase of some type of $2.5 million to do all the roads? And not sewers and not flags and not painting, but the roads. And then, as a voter, I would say, yeah, I'll pay for that, or I won't pay for that. But if you're saying, you know, let's raise taxes and then I'll tell you where it's going, I'm not sure I'm for that.
No, this, I don't think that was what we're trying to present, and if it came across that way, then
It did.
obviously we need to, well, that's why we're having this meeting, because if you're confused, or we're confused on our presentation, then we need to fix that, and now's an opportunity to try. So let me tell you, as I came into this meeting tonight, and I knew obviously what was coming, I had the idea that the figures that are here that are covered by scenario 3 are pretty darn good estimates courtesy of our engineer and the staff that put this together. However, what the caveat here, and this is something that even with any construction project or anybody who has done any kind of remodeling or redecorating in their home finds out. You think you're starting with a $5,000 project and it costs you $6,500 or $7,000. That's here. Until the engineer goes out and does core samples, what we're hoping happens here is averaging out. If we looked at a road that needs $100,000 worth of repairs based on the estimate, and it turns out it needs more, and it may cost $10,000 or $20,000 more, there might be some roads here where the estimate turns out to be more than enough, and there'll be savings because maybe they don't quite have to do as much. Is that my understanding, Ed and Dave, on the thought process behind the figures here?
But I also think his question is, and I don't think we expressed that, we did say this would be a road bond that would strictly pay for the roads and nothing else. I don't think, did anybody else misunderstand that in the audience? This is strictly a road bond
I'm calling him,
to
no,
pay
I'm calling
for
somebody else.
the road,
I'm calling her.
nothing else. The money will
That is
go up.
different than what came from home rule, et cetera, et cetera. That's totally different.
Okay, the lady in front of Mr. Kaiser.
Beverly Atkins, 6212 Edgewood Lane West. I think in the past, the problems with the way things were presented were, it was not specific. The key thing we're saying tonight is, we hope that the people of Indian Head Park will back a bond referendum specifically for roads at X number of dollars, which you, as a board, will have to decide if you're gonna go for the whole plan or the part plan. I don't think you should mix any other tax increases into that, because then they'll say, oh, they're raising my taxes here and they're raising my taxes there. What we want is a specific one plan for roads, because I think that you can get the backing from through the whole community. And I think it would be not astute to mix other things with it, such as stiffer increases and so forth at this time. You can do that later, but at this point, I think we all think our roads desperately need to be fixed. And whether you decide to do the whole village or part of the village, I guess will be, that's your decision as trustees today. I personally would back doing the whole village. The other thing to think about real quickly as you do this bonding is that our interest rates are not gonna stay this long. We don't know when they're gonna go up. We now think we're gonna have another 6 month to a year window, but we may not have. We do not know what our national and government's gonna do. So the point is, while we have low interest rates, it's probably never gonna be any cheaper with less inflation than right now if we can get this passed next spring.
Very good point, Ms. Atkins, and I agree with you. The one thing that's different here versus the prior two referendum is the last two were meant to address greater, broader needs in the general spectrum in the village, including hiring an additional police officer, servicing some debt, and having some money for a road program. We put that to the voters, and the voters have an opportunity to express their opinion on it. We all know the result. The fact is we still need to fix the streets. We need all the rest of it, but tonight we're focusing on fixing the streets, and I think the input we have from our board, our public works trustees, and the people who put the report together is how do we pay for fixing these streets? And we're focused totally on a street bond, similar to what happened in 1996, and then the bond payments, you know, they got the money, they paved the streets, and in 1997, they started making the payments. It concluded 14 years later in December of 2011. And that part of your property tax bill for that bond went away. This would repeat that process.
Well, you can explain that as you try to sell the bond issue if you decide to do it.
I think whatever the board ultimately decides collectively to do, we will do our best. I'm going to recognize the gentleman in the back there, Mr. Durkin.
And Jim Durkin again. I think, you know, from my perspective, it's been clear since the beginning that we've talked, we know our streets are a mess. I support and would support a comprehensive approach to the repair of those streets. There is no doubt in my mind that tonight you're talking about a street bond, nothing else, and that your best estimate right now is 2.5 million to do it all. That's what's there. It's not, if I understand it, that's what you're saying tonight, and there's no doubt about that.
So just to make sure that everybody understands, and that's why we did the PowerPoint today, and that's why the PowerPoint is on the internet, and that's why we wanted to make sure that you had all of this before you came here tonight. Again, to try to create a comprehensive message for what we would like to do. On page 9, you will see that it's a infrastructure bond for streets. So that's what we are envisioning. You see that there are 3 scenarios. I think we all, you know, we have personal feelings that the all plan would be in the best interest of all the residents in the village. So we tried to put that on slide 9 for all of you to see. So you can see what the cost of money is and the cost of interest as well, depending on how we do the financing.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I think if we're going to go to a referendum, I think the timeline is very tight, and if we're going to do it, we got to approach it very seriously from a communications perspective. Because with all due respect, some of the previous efforts, I think, lacked a lot of real good concrete communications.
I would echo that, very sincerely. That's all I have to say.
Mr., and then we'll go to questions. If I can put you on the spot just for a
Sure.
minute, and let me ask this.
Wouldn't be the first time.
assuming scenario 3 at the $2.5 million, okay? Do you individually, and if you don't, if you're not prepared to answer, I'll accept that too, because there's a lot. Would you prefer having that paid off 10 years, 15 years, or the 20 years? The benefit of 10 years is that the banks aren't gonna have to worry about the interest rates for the longer period of time, so the rate will likely be lower. The longer the money is gonna be loaned out to us, they're not sure, but we end up paying more interest.
I'll answer it,
Go
no
ahead.
problem. I'm a short-term guy. I prefer short-term loans, and I don't like 20-year loans, and I'd like to pay less interest. So I would support a 10 or 15, maybe 15, but I prefer a 10.
Even if that results in a bigger hit to you right now.
Even now.
You'd rather pay.
Because I would like to
bigger
do it
hit
now.
and get it paid off and be done with it.
I would like to do it now and take responsibility for my own bills and not be like Chicago and painting flagpoles or whatever.
Yes,
And not put the responsibility on our kids or grandkids.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Gentleman here has his hand up.
Ben Green, 6444 Pontiac Drive. I agree certainly with what the gentleman says. I'm also a short-term guy. However, I think the important thing is to be able to sell this program to the rest of the community. The people here are, I think we're all pretty much in favor of this, not everybody, but I think majority here would be in favor. I think you've done a great job of presenting this plan. I'm 100% in favor of it, but we've seen home rule and referendums fail and fail and fail. We've got to sell the program, and I think we'd have a better chance of selling a 15-year program than a 10-year program. That has to be considered. So I think the biggest challenge will be, if we're going to do the time frame, is to get out the word and spend some money to print flyers or whatever it takes and get this thing sold, because most of us probably going to vote for it, but we all know there are a lot, that aren't going to vote for it.
And that's a good point, and I, like you and Mr. Durkin, my first preference is not to owe money at all, and my second preference is if I do owe it, I want to pay it off and be done with it quicker. However, there are, and I appreciate everybody's here, there are a lot of people, including people on seniors on fixed income, who also have a vote and would likely come out and vote. And we do have to take that into account in terms of packaging it. So, you know, it's the less interest and the short-term payoff, but it's a bigger hit to everybody. And we don't want to hurt, you know, residents who may not be able to absorb that higher payment initially. So perhaps the 15-year. I'm just throwing that out as an alternative. But anyway, over here, first row we'll go to.
Margaret Slice, 1153 Arrowhead Trail. And this is just an idea off the top of my head, so excuse me. But in just doing the math, it seems that if your house is worth $500,000 and we were on a 15-year program, we're talking about less than $4,000. Have we ever considered maybe preparing something and going to the individual households and saying, look, if you have the ability, could you give us a check for $4,000? If that's what it took to get this job done, then might not need a $2.5 million bond. And then maybe the bond is a bit smaller because some people would have the ability to pay it up front. And then those that really maybe on fixed incomes who might need to get a smaller payment because it would be a lower rate bond.
Plus they don't even get, they live in Mill Street, they don't even get used to the streets.
Right.
They're not gonna vote for this, I'm blast. But
Appreciate the input. That's a novel approach to it. I don't even know if we could do something.
just buy the bond.
Yeah, there you go. We'll have to look, we will have to look into that. Can you order that, Mr. Kismet?
In order to sell this to the people, would you be interested or would you contemplate basically sending out list number 3 so that everybody can see that their streets are gonna be affected somehow?
Things get a little simpler and shorter than this.
Yeah, something simple to let someone know that all these streets are going to be, you know, all these streets are gonna be brought up to snuff, so they can see that there's a benefit to them, as opposed to thinking that the benefits are always for somebody else, but not for them. I see my streets on here, even though you're just gonna put some tar on it, that's fine with me. if I didn't see my street on there, I might not be quite so anxious to do that. I'm thinking of other people, I'll pay for it no matter what. But if you let people know how many people that look on their thing and see their street being affected, might have a much more positive impact than just saying, we're gonna spend $2 million to fix the street, but not referring to their particular street.
I think you bring up a good point, and that adds to the idea of, you know, even though your street might get some tar on it, the other streets might get more work, but that's gonna increase the value
They're all gonna be
of
better.
everybody's home, I think, when the town looks, it looks like it's being maintained. I think that'll increase the value of our homes as well.
Let them see that it actually does affect them.
Well, we certainly intend to put this on.
Well, this is,
on
this
the
is.
internet. And if the board, in order to get this going sooner rather than later, which I think all of us here would like to see, especially with the fact that's been pointed out, that the interest rates will probably go up over time, we have the opportunity to act if we act quickly, rather than put it out and wait. The unfortunate thing with referendum in a non-home rule community is, and I've pointed out before, is that you only get 2 cracks at it per year to get something there. And if we blow the deadline, December 30th, for a March election, we can't wait, we can't do it until the November election. And that means you're not gonna be even getting to the point of fixing the marbles in the street until the summer of 2015.
Is the turnout enough at a primary?
Trustee,
We have to, we're gonna have to work this, we're gonna have to work, every one of us.
We get the motivated people.
Unfortunately, it seems that even on low turnout, traditionally low turnout elections, people will come out to vote no on something, but what we need to do is make them vote yes. I saw on this side here,
Shirley Yang, 11120 Glenwood Lane. So let's say March comes around, great news, we pass the referendum, and I think this goes back to questions like Jill was asking, we need the votes now. Will we be ready to issue the bond as soon as this referendum is passed, and will we have a contractor ready to go? Or are there things we can do today, like start talking to the bond underwriters or the advisor, at least get an idea of what our credit spread is, who knows what kind of borrowing costs Indian Park will have. Get an idea, that'll help us understand how much it's really gonna cost. And then can we at least put the bid documents together for the contractor, so we're ready to go? As soon as we get closer to that point, we can issue them on the website and get the contractors to start bidding, and we can be ready as soon as this thing's passed in March, because I'm confident we're gonna pass this.
we have the, I'm in favor of going with this.
Mutter.
And we have to start now, I think we have to start, maybe we start talking to the underwriters, and then on the other side, we can contact the engineering work.
Back there.
Hi, Joanne Tesman, 11167 Edgebrook Lane. I think it's, I mean, everyone here is in agreement that probably everyone here would vote for it, but I think in the communication, it's gonna be really important to give some sort of an approximate timeline, like if this is passed in March, then here's an approximate start date, because if people think it's 6 months, a year out, there's less urgency, but if we knew and the study was done ahead of time that this could potentially start as soon as the beginning of summer, everybody's gonna get on board, because you're gonna see immediate results, taxes go up, but we're actually seeing what we're paying for. So I think the communication, and I for one would be willing, I live in Ashbrook, to go through door to door and inform people who might not be at the meetings or who might not read newsletters, to actually make sure that people know what this is, because I think people have tuned out because of past referendums and they may not fully understand or bother to read. But if we're all have a stake in this, that if we do personally take it on and talk to neighbors, that we can get this passed.
That's a good idea to have a timeline to go along with. I'll ask our public works trustee, Ed, Dave.
Well, at the last meeting, we talked about a couple of action items. I think tactically, we have all the engineering and physical RFP and preparing everything for the physical process of starting the process. We had the discussion at the last meeting that this is going to be a PR effort and communication effort. And I think part of that is going to be showing and increasing our credibility that we have a good plan and that we have timing associated with it. So all of that, I think, will go into a communications plan that we'll have to have some block captains and some neighborhood watch block captains maybe help us with helping get the word out about
It starts here, it starts with all of you talking to your neighbors, and there's a good turnout, and I'm happy for that, but I also happen to know that there are sections of the town who the people are gonna sit back and say, I don't need any Indian Head Park Street. Why do I have to vote? Why do you wanna take my money for it? And that's a fact, and I don't really care to get into talking where that is, but there are. That's the reality of our town. Our town has, we're like other towns, but we're really unique in a lot of factors. One is the dichotomy on our sanitary districts and water supply. There's two of them. We have state road and county roads, and there are people who go right from their parking lot to the state or county road that we don't control. We have developments that it's their street, not our street, yet they would be included in paying the taxes. For the past referendum and for this one, it's a big hurdle, folks. But the thing is we are, as I said before, we're all in this together, and if the whole town looks good, all of the property value goes up.
Lee Cocan again, Ashbrook. I agree with everybody, with what you guys are saying, but as my wife and I were discussing, we have a great deal of elderly people in our community. And to me, it would be like an assessment at a country club. If you're 80 years old, are you gonna wanna pay another $300 or $200 a month to get the streets done? All of us here are in agreement of it, but there's a lot of people, this is, if you ask me, wait, hold on, I don't need, okay? What I'm saying is, for the turnout here, to me, is lame for the amount of people that live in our community. And we all want the streets done, but what about the 98% of our community that isn't here tonight? What, are you gonna be able to get the word across to them to get it done? That's what I think Joanne brought that up, and Jimmy, about, really getting the point across.
We certainly, I think we have, and we will continue to do our best to try to get the information in front of the people. Unfortunately, we can't make them read or take seriously any of the information that we present to them. I agree with you, it's a good turnout, but it's not, no offense to the folks present, but there are a lot of people, a real lot of people who could be here tonight who are not. And we have to consider their viewpoints as well, because they're gonna get affected by it. And just, I think there may have been a concern you mentioned about $200 or $300 per month. Just to be clear, these numbers are annual costs, not monthly.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay,
right.
that's okay, I just wanna make sure you understand.
Still. Oh.
That I understood what you said. Anyway, this gentleman in the second row here, please.
Hi, Tom Roberts, 11351 Plainfield Road. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I want to ask anyway. The 2.5 million for 20 years is roughly $110 a year. That is fixed, that doesn't float with the change in the EDA.
That number would fluctuate if the value of the home changed in relationship to.
So it would change yearly? Or could change, well, 3 years.
The numbers, that number's not locked in. I mean, that's an estimated number because we don't know what the multiplier and all those factors are going to be. But any individual person's home in relation to another person's home, if they don't change, that relationship should stay the same. But if you put an addition on your home, or something like that, that would cause that.
I mean, you're talking 20 years, they could easily double, triple, right?
No,
No?
no,
Why?
because the total amount that's needed for the repayment is fixed.
Okay, that's,
So
then
that's
why
not gonna
doesn't
go up.
that stay flat for?
I'm sorry?
The total amount you borrow,
Yes,
0.5 mil,
yes,
that number says you pay it back in that period of time, right?
that's correct.
Interest and principal.